What's the most ridiculous rule in your place of work? I once needed a pen. Figured this was a reasonable ask. Went to the supply closet on my floor, which was locked. Asked the floor's admin. She told me to go to the main supply room in the basement. Went to the basement and explained my situation of needing a pen. They told me all requests for supplies must be approved by my department head. Problem is, being new, I'd never met my department head. She also worked in San Francisco. I worked in Milwaukee. So I needed to send an email both introducing myself and asking her if I had permission to get a pen from the supply closet. Story 2. 2 weeks after I left my previous job, a memo went round saying, people aren't allowed to look out of the windows at work anymore. It's a big-ass glass building. It's not American Express. Eyes shifting. Story 3. I used to work for a large bank. We had an attendance policy that was so complicated, it actually created an incentive for employees to take an entire day off rather than be tardy too often. Story 4. We have a lock on the first aid kits. So if you just need a band-aid for a cut, you have to get the key from the safety guy, which in turn makes it a reportable accident with mountains of paperwork and investigations. We use an unbelievable amount of duct tape now. Story 5. I drive valet. The company handbook says you're never allowed to back up. Ever. You absolutely cannot do the job without reverse. It's impossible. It's in there because of liability in our insurance policy. This way it can always be the valet's fault if an accident occurs ever. If the rule says no reverse, yet you're expected to park a car, then how can you park the car? Answer, never hit anything and always reverse despite the rules. Expect to be fired should you hit anything in reverse, but probably not. The rule only exists to cover the company's ass. But if they don't feel threatened by you working there and you're an asset, you still will not be fired. And yes, many people are questioning the legality of it, and you're right. It wouldn't hold up in courts, but it's in the handbook, and it's silly. Story 6. All the extra toilet paper in the building has to stay in a single closet where it can be overseen by the toilet paper queen. I heard her shrieking the other day when she discovered someone had hoarded one spare roll of toilet paper upstairs so the people who work upstairs wouldn't have to walk down multiple flights of stairs when the toilet paper ran out. It's the cheapest one-ply toilet paper available on the giant rolls that only fit in the special dispensers. I can't imagine anyone wanting to steal it. Story 7. A rule that said, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean, which fairly obviously meant if there was no work, then you should be cleaning things. It was at an aircraft servicing station that was fairly small, but we needed a crew of at least 3 people for larger planes. The problem was that sometimes there were just no planes, so there was no work. We would clean for a couple hours, and then just run out of stuff to clean, but according to management, that was no good. We had to be busy. It got to be that we would fight over work when it came in, because everyone was so bored, and finding pretend busy work was much, much harder than just working. I remember getting the crew together to pick up pebbles off the taxiway for a couple hours. There's an old joke in aviation, go sweep the taxiway. So we actually did it. Story 8. I used to work for Amazon in Ireland, and their toilet breaks were crazy. Maximum of 10 minutes a day, but also a max of 20 minutes per week. You had to change the status on your computer so everything was recorded, and some managers would call you out on it, and even go as far as threaten your job. I had an understanding with my manager and told him if I need to take a crap, then I'm going for it. Like any good manager, he just told me that as long as I give him the numbers he wants, then I could do what I want. I thought I had to add that I was treated with great respect while working there and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I can't speak for other employees in the business, but I've heard the stories. Incidentally, I now work in construction where someone isn't looking over your shoulder and checking every minute of every day. If you haven't seen the great movie Office Space, watch it. Describes my situation perfectly. To answer your other question, my manager was looking for performance numbers. I was the one looking for ones and twos story. 9. When I was in the military, I saw a buddy of mine sitting outside crying. I went and consoled him best as I could. Apparently, he was just depressed and unhappy. After he was feeling a bit better, I went to go and find someone to tell them what was happening. They knew. In fact, he had been crying so much lately that they had instituted a no crying at your desk policy, which is why he was outside. Story 10. Empty inbox. My boss was an inbox Nazi. Like if you had old emails in there, he would flip and make you respond to them or delete them. Apparently, you shouldn't have anything left at the end of the day. Deal with them or delete them. Joke's on him, though. I just made a subfolder marked personal, and everything went in there. Get ducked, Bill You Old Story 11. I used to work for the now long defunct books, movies, and music store Media Play. Just one of the 285 reasons that poorly run business ran into the ground was the tardy/attendance policy. If you were literally 0.01 seconds late clocking in, even hours before the store opened, it was a really, really big deal. You'd not only be formally written up, but lectured like a child, oftentimes berated even. If you were tardy 3 times, bye-bye. However, if you no-showed and then called 2 hours later saying you were sick, okay, thank you, feel better. This trained everyone to just take a sick day instead of being half a second late to work. I can't tell you how many times you'd see a coworker screeching into the parking lot before work after fighting traffic from a wreck or whatever, noticing it was 8:01, and then slowly driving off to go home and feign being sick. This was particularly upsetting when it was a pull-down stock week, when we needed every hand on deck but had unusually early shifts. Story 12. There was an issue where there was too much socializing going on the factory floor, particularly when people were working while sitting down. False, skewed supervisor perception, so they made everybody stand. When that presented ergonomics problems, they brought in these weird chairs that made you sit at a slant, had no backs and no wheels, so they wouldn't cause distraction. No part of it made any sense. Story 13. My workplace doesn't let you use the word problem. Instead, we have to say challenges if something is wrong, as a problem is a negative word, and challenges promotes the fact that there is room to fix said problem. Story 14. I don't know if it's standard, but I worked at a place where HR wasn't allowed to tell us if someone was fired. It was a big enough place that you might not immediately realize someone had left, and when you found out, you weren't supposed to ask why. So if you wanted to know if they were fired, you asked, was there cake? Which was to say that if the person had retired or left pleasantly after a number of years, they would be given a party with cake. If they were fired, not so much. I haven't seen Brian for some time. Brian is no longer with us. Brian no longer works here. Was there cake? Just clarifying that Brian is alive in this scenario, except for below where I said he was dead for karma. Story 15. Firemen. Our risk management department decided long ago that poles were too risky for us. So we use the stairs. We have poles. Anyway, now the newest rule is free weights. As in no free weights to work out, stay fit. Go into burning high rise. Absolutely. Walk around the station carrying 40 balamlab dumbbells. Too risky. Story 16. If you are 1 min late, it is a tardy. If you take a half day, nothing goes on your record. I was told to just take a half day if you are going to be late because they straight up fire you for tardies. Also, if you clock out early, it is a tardy. If you have to go to the doctor on lunch break and it is going to take an hour and 10 min, take the rest of the day off. Weird. Story 17. I used to work at a place in which my boss implemented a no more than 2 glasses a day water policy. I ignored this rule and complained directly to our CEO, and the matter ended later that day. What was weird though was the majority of people actually followed the rule, and some even shopped me up to HR about breaking the rules. I left not long after that because not only was my boss a bellend, but if my colleagues were going to HR over me drinking water, then I obviously couldn't trust them. Story 18. Old job of mine in a warehouse. Our stations were pretty far apart, so when we'd listen to music, we'd all usually have our own stuff playing. Not a problem since you could barely hear the neighbor's music. Well, the CEO didn't like hearing multiple songs when walking through the warehouse. He made a rule that we all either had to listen to the same music or none at all. Story 19. Many years ago, I was a vacuum cleaner salesman. There were songs about this particular brand of vacuum cleaner and how awesome it was. Every morning we had to sing these songs as a group. In fairness, it was a pretty quality item. Edit, it was Kirby. Didn't mean to be subversive, just didn't think anybody would care. Story 20. Once worked at a place where some mini boss decided that since UPS trucks don't turn left, we shouldn't either. I don't know or care how well that worked out for us, but this was a damned ambulance company with a 911 contract. I will turn left if and when I ducking need to turn left. Follow up. I don't know if UPS trucks turn left or not, or if that is beneficial for them or not. And frankly, I don't care. The point is that Miniboss thought they did, and that was the reasoning he gave. He was an idiot. I did not stay there long. Story 21. I worked as a call receiver. We never saw a customer. We were only on the phones with them. Rule: your hair must only be a natural color. I dyed my hair the same exact color that someone from a different shift had. I was reprimanded. I told them that if the rule is not enforced for everyone, they couldn't single me out. Their reasoning for letting the other person have that color, but not me. Mine was my real hair, dyed an unnatural color. Hers was a weave that could be changed very easily. Really? Then why hasn't she been asked to change her hair? Because that crap is expensive. They gave up trying to convince me they were in the right. Story 22. My dad told me this one a while back. He used to work for a PR firm. The way he described the office environment, think The Office, but in the 1980s. The company hired a corporate efficiency specialist to come in and improve things. She came in and implemented all kinds of rules, which seemed to follow some sort of caste system. Her philosophy was the higher your office rank, the more perks you get. Her idea of perks: number of pictures you're allowed in your cubicle, whether you're allowed to have a potted plant or not. Coffee mugs were only allowed to senior employees. Others had to use paper cups. Being allowed to leave the office for lunch was also considered a perk. Needless to say, a coup soon followed, and she was tossed out on her hiney. Story 23. If we want to take a full 5-day week off, we need to use 2 vacation days, 1 personal, and 2 more vacation days. Can never use 3 vacation days straight. Story 24. Old workplace had assigned desk location for various things like phone and stapler. You were also only allowed 2 personal items on your desk. I was written up BC, I brought my own red stapler, and it didn't fit in between the lines put on the desk. Story 25. I work in retail and we have on-call shifts. Your name will be listed on the schedule for a certain time as a call-in, so you have to call 1 hour before your shift to figure out if they need you to work for the day. For example, you would be listed as on call for 2 p.m. and wouldn't know until 1 p.m. if you were working that evening. If you don't call in, it's considered not showing up for a shift, but there's no extra pay for the shift whether they need you or not. So for 3 days of the week, I don't know if I have to work or not. Can't make any solid plans to do anything except call my work and ask if they need me. I can't imagine having children or elderly that need taken care of because it would be such a hassle to arrange care for them just an hour before having to work. Edit. Okay, folks, I get it. You want me to sue this corporate demon. I'm looking into it now and will update with any relevant developments. I'm going to dig up my contract tomorrow and see if I can speak to a law person. Thanks for motivating me. Story 26. At my old job, HR held a meeting to tell us that there was too much swearing on the sales floor. Someone raised their hand and pointed out that swearing is very common in our industry, and that is the way that our customers speak. HR later sent out a memo explaining that swearing should be limited to conversations with clients. It was amazing. Story 27. It's not like this anymore, but for a while, they attempted to have a dress code. Guys had to wear collared shirts, but Hawaiian-style shirts were totally acceptable. You could not wear jean shorts, but jean overall shorts were okay. I got sent home one day because my shorts weren't fingertip length. We were tech support. No one ever saw us. That was the best part. Edit. Because everyone is asking, fingertip length meant standing with your arms at your sides, and your shorts had to be longer than where your fingertips ended. Think grade school rules. Story 28. Not my current job, but I used to work for some crazy people. You had to stand in a specific area while eating so they could see you on the camera. Don't talk to customers longer than 3 minutes, unless you're making a big sale. Even then, keep it short. Answer the phone within 2 rings. Keep the conversation to less than 30 seconds. You can't talk to your coworkers outside of work. You can't talk to your coworkers while at work. Even if there was not a single customer in the store, I'm sure there's more I just can't think of right now. Story 29. This handbook can be changed without notice at the company's discretion. So, medical leave, 3 days medical leave per year. Fine, I'll use my PTO and expect to get disability for the remaining time. After I have major surgery, an addendum. 2 weeks later, medical leave for surgery must have written documentation from a doctor outlining your recovery schedule and when you may return to work. When I return on a limited schedule. 6 weeks later, the ER manager comes into my office. You didn't have the authorization letter before surgery, so you better be here or face the unfortunate circumstance of disciplinary action. While I'm at it, since I'm under contract for 5 years, does anybody know about the legal definition of peonage? Edit. The specific text of the disclaimer is this handbook is subject to change without prior notice and at management's discretion. Story 30. Our workplace started a friendly post-it war with the office across the street that went on for about half a day. Honestly, all of the pictures were safe. Just Metroid Samus, Mario, emojis, super basic stuff. The pieces were getting pretty good too, and it was clear both offices were having a blast thinking of the next fun design. Our CEO walked by around 4 p.m. that day, saw the post-it art, and asked what it was. We exclaimed, "Oh, just a post-it war with that office. Would you like to join us in the next mural?" She said she didn't get it. She didn't get the concept of the post-it war. So we spent a few minutes trying to explain what it was about. You make art out of post-it notes, and whoever has the best mural wins. Pretty simple stuff. She kind of laughed it off, but it was clear to all of us that she still didn't quite understand why someone would do it. What a silly millennial thing, she must have thought. The next morning, an office memo was on every desk saying that no one was allowed to put post-its on windows. We had to take all of our art down. When we asked the office manager, WTF, we did wrong, she explained that the CEO quite literally still didn't understand it and banned post-its for that reason. This happened days before Christmas last year. The holiday party was that evening. The next day, Friday, nearly everyone was out to start their vacations. It was very clear that we were not interrupting a busy workday by spending lunch making a few murals. We are not some band of idiots that can't understand the meaning of a productive workday. Our CEO was just a straight-up Grinch. Story 31. Had a workplace time our bathroom breaks and deduct them from our allotted 15-minute breaks or lunch. We had to go see the office manager to get a key to open the restroom. As soon as we left his office, he would start a timer. When you got back, he would stop the timer and tell you how much time you needed to deduct from your lunch or next break. They watched our breaks like a hawk. Also, if you made a mistake, they would stand over you and time you while you fixed it and deduct that from your lunch or breaks. You couldn't bring anything that smells for lunch, and they had no way of heating anything up. I worked out my contract and split. Story 32. We can't personalize our workspace. There are no nameplates on anyone's workstation either. No pictures, no mementos, nothing but work stuff. It is bad enough we are jammed into an open floor plan and have to spend many hours at our desks, but then to deny us the ability to make it more enjoyable? Petty. Story 33. Not current job, but at my last job at a store cafe, an unspoken rule, as in me and my manager were never told this by our boss, was that we were not allowed to let a health inspector see anything that they come to inspect while still getting a good grade. We followed health and safety laws, but our bosses didn't. We were one of the smaller stores or cafes in this chain of 20-plus stores and cafes. The health inspector must have realized that it was the company's fault for all the health and safety breaches because we, the staff, were given near full marks on the staff's health and safety responsibilities, but the boss's responsibilities was a different story. No fly killer in store. Despite them being attracted by our bakery part and us having a fly killer out back for over a month, but no one was ever sent to install it. No mouse/rat traps, only one sink, law requires 2, one for hands and one for dishes, no hot water, the counter where we put. The coffee down wasn't nailed down, and we actually had a customer attempt to sue over a spilt coffee. Some of our bakery was expired, but we were made to put it out because, according to our company's food manager, they looked okay, so they must be okay. The list goes on. Our manager ended up showing the health inspector months of emails and texts and WhatsApp messages informing the bosses of these health and safety breaches and asking them to be fixed, all of which were promptly ignored. Later that day, our boss calls and screams over the phone at my manager, tells him that it's all our fault and it's our job to make sure the health inspector never finds out about all that. Over the next week, she comes in every single day where she just watches us work from the office on the security cameras and gives out at us for every little thing and makes a massive deal over everything. Like, for example, I had a mini sneezing fit one of those days and was yelled at in front of customers because I was going to infect everyone and all our food. Glad to be out of that hellhole. Last I heard, a few of the stores she manages, 5 store managers quit all in 1 week while she was on holidays, so she took over managing those stores, are failing with massive sales drops and mass employee quitting ever since she took over them. Story 34. Former job. You couldn't eat at your desk. The team managers, however, were pretty tolerant. On a hot day, they would sometimes even hand out popsicles. The regulation people, who were especially in charge on the weekends when no team managers were around, were very strict with this. A colleague of mine was shouted at because she ate a small pretzel, which was her breakfast. Then again, some colleagues would casually eat a whole pizza or kebab while making a huge mess. Story 35. Previous job. Given a tablet and a locker, had to look for a desk to sit on every morning. Stupid caused unnecessary friction, waste of time, inefficient, and many occupied the same desk every day anyway. They piled junks on their desk, so no one else dared to sit. Once my manager had mental breakdown, he hid another floor away from us. It was ridiculous having to walk that far to get to him multiple times a day. Story 36. I wrote the ridiculous coffee-making rules for my workplace, but I had my reasons. I was a woman on the edge. The coffee was unbearable, and every time it was bad, I would have a parade of people through my office complaining and a deluge of emails wasting my time. So I wrote a guide, rules if you will, on how to use the extremely simple drip coffee maker in our break room. I emailed them to everyone. I put 2 copies in the break room, one of them in the cupboard where the ground coffee was kept. I went through it with people who didn't understand. Minutes of everyone's time was wasted. No improvement, endless complaints to me, more of my time wasted. By this point, I was fed up of even hearing the word coffee. The sound of the coffee maker caused me to flinch. So I ordered prepackaged coffee grounds to take the measurement difficulty out of the equation. How can you get that wrong? I thought naively. On the first day of what I was sure would be the new world, a coffee nirvana, I went to the coffee machine with high expectations. The senior partner had beaten me to it. She had put 4 sachets of coffee into the machine and added enough water to make 6 cups of coffee. The first mouthful nearly killed us. I went over it again with her and returned to my office, confident that this was a one-time problem. After lunch, I went back to try and get a cup of coffee. My expectations were not so high. I witnessed another senior partner carefully opening the sachet of grounds and reach for a teaspoon. She carefully spooned out a quarter of the sachet into the machine, filled the machine with enough water for 12 cups, and triumphantly threw the rest of the sachet away. I waited, we tasted it together. She was appalled. She had no idea why it was so weak. I started a new pot, slowly filling with despair as it brewed. I couldn't shake one thought. I work for a doctor's surgery. These people prescribe. I went back to my office. I ordered a giant container of respectable instant coffee and a padlock. I keep the ground coffee locked in my desk. I brew 4 pots a day. This takes less time than the complaints. And on my day off, they make do with instant. We have a kettle. People are welcome to bring their own filter coffee and do with it what they will. Until someone can be trusted to make a pot of coffee, which is not so awful as to inspire 8 people to email me multiple times a day, each one of them hitting reply, all to create a small email firestorm in my inbox. This is the way things have to be. Story 37. Former job at a law office. One of the partners sent an email to the entire staff that employees were not allowed to gossip in the building. What was everyone gossiping about, you ask? Oh, said partner was divorcing his wife and sleeping with one of the associate attorneys in the firm. But don't gossip. Story 38. I work for the federal government, so there are tons and tons of rules. Most of them are there for good reason. The one I really hate, though, is that we have to pay to join the water cooler club to use the water cooler. It's like $30 every month or two. I get it. Taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook for extravagant purchases, and there are certain perks you get in the private sector that you don't get in the public sector, and vice versa. I just don't think it's the height of decadence to want decent water. They say we can just use the fountains, but the fountains are disgusting. This isn't the local post office either. This is a major department's main building in DC. Story 39. I'm a teacher, so I have a million stupid rules I have to follow. But the worst one is that my performance evaluation is based on student improvement on the STAR literacy test. I teach woodshop. Story 40. If someone is issued a refund because the decorator messed up, it comes out of my commission because I made the sale even though I had nothing to do with the screw-up. Story 41. I worked in a company where we have to file any kinds of leave 2 weeks in advance, including bereavement and sick. We told HR that we are yet to master the art of fortune telling to see if we'll get sick or a relative will die anytime soon. They did not reply. We left the company in Story 42. If you had to take a leave on Monday or Friday so that you have an extended weekend of 3 days instead of 2, it was counted as 3 days leave, counting in Saturday and Sunday. Deal with that. Story 43. We aren't allowed to wear jackets unless they are purchased from the resort gift shop with the hotel name logo on it. They are $50+, and we don't get reimbursed, but it's the price you pay to stay warm in the cold months. Story 44. Dress code policy is just dumb at my work. Different positions have different requirements, even though we all work in the same office. My favorite rule, though, is the one on shorts. We can wear shorts on Fridays between Memorial Day and Labor Day. However, the shorts can't have pockets on the side. It was written to discourage ratty cargo shorts, but the way in which it is written allows me to wear gym shorts, so I do. Story 45. At my last workplace, we had to pay 50 cents to use a K-cup. It was an office. They also had a no websites or YouTube policy and policed us using the security cameras. We'd get messages if they noticed us on a site. It was a well-known fact that the manager watched Netflix in his office and played World of Warcraft while watching the security cameras to make sure people weren't slacking. Story 46. What you can get at cafeteria's salad bar. 2 cherry tomatoes, 2 baby corns, 3 broccolis. Cafeteria workers will legit come after you if you take more than this. Story 47. We have to do all of our paperwork at least 3 times. There's a copy of it in our personal folders, a copy online, and a copy in our store folders. Not only does it waste time and paper, but forgetting to do one has gotten people fired. They did the other 2 identical pieces of paperwork, confirming that yes, they did take out the trash, and yes, they did check the store voicemail, but how dare they forget to do the 3rd piece of identical paperwork? Our weekly visits from corporate revolve around whether or not we've all done this paperwork. It's so redundant. Story 48. Not the most ridiculous, especially by virtue of what anyone else will say, but at my first job, we had a clean desk policy. In other words, nothing on your desk besides what you're currently using. Pretty ducking stupid by default, but me, and a few others specifically, working in it, often had to set up computers and laptops, while also taking on support tickets at the same time. And we had no spare desks to use as a lab, so we couldn't set anything up anymore. We'd have to leave the office to do that part of our job. So we no longer could take calls, tickets, etc., and we just kind of ducked around in the tech area, because otherwise we'd have to climb stairs up and down every time we were going to work on some new machines, even servers. I told all of this to the superiors. They held fast. The price was an untold amount of tickets building up, new users not getting their machines in time, and a general decrease in productivity, ultimately leading to the company failing. Story 49. We got a new vacation policy where you could take unlimited time off. When he announced it, we looked at the big boss like he had a banana growing out of his forehead. All the while, he assured us that if we wanted vacation, to take it. Really. A little bit afterward, he changed it to discretionary time off, meaning that if your boss approved it, it was okay. Then it changed to 160 hours should be the max. And if you go over 200 hours, then you probably don't need to work here. Story 50, we have a swear jar that is constantly filled. The record for number of bills put in at once goes to my boss, and it was once filled in one day after an order for parts we needed went wrong and we didn't get anything. Story 51, there's a few. I'm not allowed to whistle. Also been told to stop yawning, although not sure if the boss was serious about that one. We weren't allowed to hand out black pens to customers for a while, had to give them blue pen, despite the fact that most of the stuff the pens were needed for required black ink. We aren't allowed to give customers change if they ask. Not allowed to agree with customers if they moan about prices. Not all bad though. We're allowed snacks while working, and we're not expected to look busy when we aren't. So we can just chat if there's nothing to be done. Story 52. I worked janitorial at this community college. Every different person I was assigned to told me a different way to do things. 8 different ways to wash a window. 8 different ways to scrub a toilet. 8 different ways to tie a bag. Well, after being there for about 3 months, I tell one of the people, look, I'm a results-oriented fellow. Why does it matter if I do windows your way or windows their way? As long as the windows are clean at the end of the night, that should be good enough. He responds with something along the line of, well, when you're in this area, you're gonna do things my way, and this is the boss's way anyways, so you should do it this way. There's a fair bit more to it than that, but shortened it for brevity. Anyways, finished out the night, come in for my next shift, boss starts chewing me out, saying how I shouldn't be arguing with full-timers, and if I'm going to continue working here, I'm going to need friends. Let me remember how she precisely put it. If my employees don't like you, why would I like you? After she is done, I ask her how she cleans windows. She shows me her way, which is rather different from his way, and I ask her, well, the basis of my question is this. Every different area I go to has a different way of doing everything. Do you really want me to learn 8 different ways of doing everything? She asks me if I really want to keep arguing. I go, I'm not arguing, I'm asking for clarification. She stares at me for a solid 10 seconds. I'm not looking away, and I make the gesture, well, stares at me for another 5 seconds. And I go, I guess not. Story 53. We're allowed to sit on the floor to stock the bottom shelves, but forbid if we sit on our step stools to stock the awkward semi-low ones that break your back. Story 54. No scotch tape on anything. I was a teacher and the principal wouldn't allow it in the building. Threatening letters in your file for insubordination if she saw it on your desk. Only painter's tape, which by design is meant to not stick very well. I hung posters in my room with circles of duct tape on the backside, with strips of painter's tape on the front side just for show. Subtle, petty insubordination. Story 55. We got Keurig for our break room. Our boss removed the part of it that you use the K-cups for because it had a needle in it, which is what pierced the K-cup. Her reasoning is that she was afraid someone poked their finger with it. We worked in a blood donation center. We were all phlebotomists. She didn't see the irony. Story 56. The company I interned at last summer banned jQuery because they were so paranoid about open source code. For context, jQuery is so ubiquitous that you have to specifically look for JavaScript advice that doesn't assume you're using it. Story 57. Oh boy, I can't decide just one. Working at a bar inside a premium 5-star hotel, if a customer asks for a straw, we have to say we don't have. If he doesn't insist, he doesn't get a straw. But if he insists, we have to gladly offer him a brand new biodegradable straw with the company logo and brag about how nature-friendly we are. We separate plastic from organic waste, which is nice, except all the waste ends up in the same place at the end. No recycling at all. But you'll be in trouble if you're found mixing it up at the workplace. For some dumb reason, we're only allowed 1 masher at the bar. We have 3 counters, I'm in charge of one of them. I make more than 50 mojitos a day, and so do my workmates at the other counters, with just 1 masher. If you can't reach something that's on a shelf, which are ridiculously high BTW, without stretching, you must use a ladder. Plot twist, there's no ladder. It results in me, the only tall person at the bar, being bothered all the time to reach for things that they can't. We can't bring any food at all from work. My shift ends at 1 a.m., there's no customer at all at that time, and there's no way they can see us leave because we leave from a basement. Every night, the kitchen brings lots of food for us to have dinner. Seafood, sushi, top quality Iberico sausages, you name it. What we don't eat goes straight to the trash. And it's a lot of food. There's more, but I was supposed to pick only one, so. Story 58, documenting your productivity. Worked for of the top 10 companies in the US. You might know them. They make crafty computers and really crafty printers. My job was reporting. I was very good with spreadsheets and somewhat enjoyed it because of this Every time something needed doing like that, it came my way. Eventually, I had a mountain of work that was pretty impossible to finish on time. I started writing scripts, macros, and more auto hotkey language. Even though possible, more and more my work was automated, and all I had to do was hit the on button. I could even leave my station and my work would finish itself. It got to the point where I'd remote in from home to start my work and just not come in for the day. My managers didn't care because I was doing the work of 5 people in ways they couldn't comprehend and getting them better numbers because of it. Then the productivity Nazi came to power. I hate this Karen. She implemented a policy where everybody had to report how they filled their day down to the minute in one of 4 categories. You were then given a productivity score, and anything under 80% was an automatic meeting with her, your direct supervisor and their supervisor. I was safe for a while because my boss covered for me. However, the type of person that takes this sort of role is usually the type of person everybody hates, who will go on personal missions for the pettiest things. See the toilet paper queen in another comment in this thread. You know who I'm talking about. Anyways, my score was always abysmal if I reported it properly. I had to start lying and pretending to be busy as more and more this lady would watch me and quiz me on what I was doing. My supervisor would give me busy work that was way beneath my pay grade to shut her up. Like guy before me was getting about $30K a month for the company out of his billing, and I was pulling in $80K a month for them because I automated the very tedious things, so it became easier to go after the minuscule stuff more and more. But here I was pushing mountains of paper into a shredder machine so I'd stay busy and keep the Karen off my back. Story 59. Working at support. Everyone was pulled into a meeting one by one to discuss negativity in the workplace. We were told we were not allowed to complain about clients between ourselves, not for the reason that I would expect and would understand in case a client heard it on the phone, but because of the negative energy in the room. In its support, complaining about people is the only thing that gets us through the day. Edit. Previously to this, I worked in a retail store of a decent size, which only ever hired 2 staff. The managers would sit out the back and do nothing pretty much. Would always catch them on their phones when I went back for something. They had a policy also where you were not allowed to be doing nothing, and you were also not allowed to sit for your whole shift, sometimes had 11-hour shifts, except for the 30-minute break where the manager went on the floor and I got to have a coffee. I was expected to run around cleaning if no one was in the store and not be allowed to be behind the till even if I had already cleaned every single shelf in the building. This also had the side effect of being at the back of the shop, behind aisles, without a bell on the door when someone came in, meaning people would often come looking for me and be really angry because I wasn't already at the till waiting for them to give them their cigarettes. This also reminded me I worked morning shifts usually and was required to be there 15 minutes early to put the papers out and start putting magazines out before it hit open time, because we would have people lining up and knocking on the door at 6 a.m. for their papers. This time was unpaid, as was the time I had to stay every day counting my till after waiting for the person taking over my shift to come out. To explain the above, person starting midday walks into the shop at 12, which is their shift start and my shift end. They then count their till, then bring it out, then I go and count my till, then get to leave. Which means I ended up working between 15 and 30 minutes overtime every day, more or less, maybe more, without extra pay. The only time we had extra pay was if we worked a full hour of overtime. Story 60. Right now I have people stuck in Houston because their boss said, "We're opening on Monday, no matter what." I insisted that they should give him the middle finger and get out of Houston, but they sat out the hurricane, and now they're stuck at home. They are safe and have food and water for another week and still have running water and electricity. But the streets around are flooded and they cannot leave. Story 61. For a while we were going through a lot of Band-Aids and my manager was tired of buying them. So she locked the last remaining Band-Aid in the safe. We had to have one, required by health inspector, and no one was allowed to use them if they cut themselves. I worked at a fast food joint where people could nick themselves on knives, tomato slicers, sharp edges, etc. If you hit yourself, you just dealt with it, openly bled. The rule changed pretty fast though when she hit herself while using a box cutter and we had no bandages in the store. Story 62. If we're short of employees, we can't say we're short-staffed or make an excuse as to why a line is backing up. Can't use a knife but won't supply you with box cutters and you can't buy your own box cutter as it's not regulation. Manager then complains the boxes are ripped open. If we're over quota on any food production, each additional unit must have signed the manager authorization, even if a customer is standing there asking you to cook it. As you can imagine, this policy didn't last long. Story 63. I mean, it's ridiculous, but in a good way. In our employee handbook, our dress code literally states this and only this. Don't come into work looking like you just changed the oil on your car. Story 64. Former job. There was trouble when I officially moved desks and my new desk had a phone with call display. Apparently, call display phones were allowed for people at a certain pay level. Your pay level also governed the height of your cubicle walls. My manager's solution was to promote me. Another former job. We were mandated to work on an engineering-related research project outside of work hours, because a responsible engineer always gives back to the engineering community. I could live with that. However, your project had to be related to the company's business. Story 65. My work has a weird policy on men's facial hair. All men must be clean-shaven, no 5 o'clock shadow, no beard big or small. Also, no one is allowed to have hair that isn't tied up. We work in customer service. Story 66. Can I chime in with a truly stupid one? Before leaving, all employees have to go into the president's office and say, "May I leave?" It's a small company, so I guess it's just to keep track of the slaves. Story 67. At our grocery store, if you have a cough or cold and would benefit from a bottle of water nearby, discreetly out of sight, due to coughing, you need a doctor's note for the water. Story 68. I work as a native English teacher in a Chinese kindergarten, and at the beginning of each year, we redecorate our classroom. Naturally, to do so, we must use craft material. However, only one person in the school is allowed access to the store cupboard, and even then, only Chinese teachers are allowed. The reason for this rule? Foreign teachers have been hoarding material in their classroom. So now we have a storeroom full of unused material and bare, ugly classroom. Welcome to Chinese Logic 101, Story 69. Being late is tardy, normal, but also leaving early is tardy, UTF. So our boss told us to schedule appointments during the middle of the day. So where I would leave 1/2 hour early to go to a late afternoon dentist appointment or 1/2 late to go before work, I now clock in, leave for the appointment during the middle of the day, and then come back, which take at least an hour and a half. Maybe it's their way of giving me an unwritten perk. Story 70. My boss, which I put in quotes because technically I'm an IC, but he still tells the ICs what to do, has sent out multiple memos reminding us to wear our shirts that the company sent out to us. Well, not only was I never sent a shirt, but when I first signed with the company, my contract explicitly stated that we aren't allowed to wear any uniforms or show any indication that we're affiliated with the company. Story 71. Govit office. At one point, our manager ran around adjusting everyone's hole punchers because someone had complained that the papers we were spiking weren't all aligning in the folder. They needed to set a regulation hole punch setting for us to use, so everything would line up. Later, we were told to staple a specific sheet to the inside of the folder. We were told very specifically how many staples and where. At a previous private sector job, we had a terrible manager who introduced all sorts of weird micromanaging rules under her tenure. But the best example I can think of is that if a phone call came in or if we just needed to find someone in a hurry, we weren't allowed to do an all call or page the person, as it would be distracting for museum visitors and appear unprofessional. She said if someone was out in the building somewhere, i.e. say not at their office extension, we should just call around different extensions located throughout the building until we find them. Because, a random wall phone ringing while a visitor walks by is less distracting and more professional than John, call the front desk over a pay system. Story 72. Nobody was allowed to drink at their desks in case they spill their drink and break the $5 keyboards we typed on. I offered to sign a binding agreement stating I would pay double the cost of anything I damaged by drink spillage. They said no. I offered to go to the store and buy 10 keyboards for them to put into storage as replacement. They said no. I don't work there anymore. 100% sure the only reason that rule existed was so that they could be sure they had a workforce of mindlessly agreeable doormats. Story 73. Grocery store here. We are not allowed to make an announcement that we are closing or now closed, or to confront a customer about being closed. Apparently, the CEO was in one of our stores past our closing time when a manager in the store made an announcement to the customers that we're still shopping many minutes past closing. CEO didn't like it because customers matter way more than employees going home. So now it's banned and we have to stay in the store and deal with still shopping customers even 40 minutes past closing. Some people know we're about to close and do it anyway, so now what we do is make an announcement to night shift employees to make their final purchases. It doesn't really work. Story 74. No hot beverages because we could burn ourselves or our students. And as a byproduct of this rule, there's no coffee maker in the break room, even though you have to clock out for lunch. We're moving our break room to a room with an actual door, so I'm hoping that'll change that part. I even offered to buy the machine. Story 75. I work for a small company, 10 employees, that distributes textiles. The company name is the founder and CEO's name. Nothing in the office is allowed to have a brand label. Any food brought into the building must be repackaged in a bag or foil. And every morning I have to pour my lunch soda or coffee into an unmarked mug before walking in. All boxes are turned inside out and taped back together. She hired someone to file the brand logos off of the computers and appliances. Cleaning supplies have labels carefully peeled off or are rebottled in generic containers. The exception to the rule are fire extinguishers that are rotated so that the labels are not visible. Story 76. No dangling earrings. I could have plugs the size of dinner plates in my ears, so long as they don't dangle externally. I work the front desk at a hotel and wear conservative 10G stainless hoops. Story 77. Worked for a pretty crafty small ambulance company service once. Each week they posted new memos about things we weren't allowed to do, including sitting on folding chairs in the back parking lot. Most EMS agencies let you chill when not on a call. People obviously thought the rules were silly, and one week there was a memo about not taking pictures of the memos, which were being mocked on social media. Story 78. Not letting us dial 911 from our suite. We learned this the hard way. A coworker was having breathing problems, and we tried to call the emergency number from our desks. We found out we couldn't. Our suite actually had to have someone walk all the way out to the lobby for someone to get them to call for us. Story 79. I'm a nurse. I can't have a drink where I sit at my computer because it's supposed to be a safety issue regarding contamination. Nurses have been written up for this. The doctors can have all the food and drinks they want where they sit and chart. We literally sit right next to each other and share the same desk. What's one rule that your school or workplace has implemented that absolutely backfired? Story 1. Work instituted a point system for being late or calling off sick. Accrue too many points and you get written up, fired if it continues. They doled out the same number of points whether someone was a minute late or called off altogether. And if an absence lasted up to 5 days, it was still only one absence. So anyone who overslept or encountered heavy traffic and was running late would just stay home for the rest of the week. After several months, they decided that being late was only worth half a point. In story 2, in our office, we're not allowed to have more than 14 consecutive days off. So one guy booked a cruise for a month, booked off 4 days, then 1 day back, then another 1 days off. He called in sick on his 1 day back. Story 3. A few years ago, we weren't allowed to stand in groups bigger than 4 at our school because this old teacher told us it was gang behavior and encouraging gang violence. One day, my entire year of like 100 plus people got in a massive group screaming gang gang and throwing gang signs on our school field, so they had to bring every single teacher out to try and split us apart for a straight 20 minutes. Best school day ever. Story 4. Any support call lasting longer than 20 minutes must be reported to higher-ups for review. I.e., if you have too many, no matter if it's your fault or not, you get a disciplinary review. I implemented the rule of politely hang up on a customer as close to 20 minutes as you can and call them right back. I'm sorry, I'm experiencing a small issue with my phone. Is it okay if I call you right back? Gotcha. Outgoing calls are not reported or recorded. It's amazing. Story 5. My old boss tried implementing an incentive scheme for the underperformers, while anyone who consistently did well received nothing. 3 of us quit within a month. Story 6. We used to be allowed to stream music, etc. on our computers. Spotify was an approved program and would come installed on your computer. Someone complained about productivity despite us always doing our work, and so the banned streaming of any kind on our computers. But now everyone just listens on their phone. So you walk around the office, and nearly everyone has their phone out now, so it looks even worse when sponsors come into the office. Story 7. My friend worked as a technician at a place that did installation for telecom, sound, cable, pretty much anything tech-related, really. The techs were paid by work order completion. Each job had a value that got paid out when you finished the work order. The experienced techs could finish more jobs in a day and made some seriously good money. They were motivated to work fast to get more jobs done, but also to do it correctly because having to go back within a certain time window and fix a problem didn't pay out, so it lost money. Well, some new management came in and decided to change everyone to hourly wages, their idea to make techs focus on getting the job done right and not rushing it. All the really good techs saw a massive pay cut from it and immediately quit. The rest of the techs suddenly had no reason to finish jobs quickly, since you got paid the same whether you did 2 installs or 10 installs in 1 day, so everyone just started slacking off. Within a few weeks, the orders were backed up so bad install dates were pushed out for a month or more. And when people finally did get their stuff installed, it took all day instead of a couple hours. That one change completely ducked over the company. Story 8. It was actually my rule. When I was managing a store, my rule was that the closer had to do all the closing work and mark the checklist, and I would check it the following morning. However, I put a loophole in. If you close tonight and open tomorrow, you can come in early the following morning. I was really the only one who closed and then opened the following morning, and I knew that on many of those days, I worked 10 hours with non-stop managerial work. So instead of staying late to clean, I like to come in early and do it in sunlight. Well, one day I followed my rule, and the next morning I woke up sick and had to call an employee to cover. He showed up to a dirty store, opted not to clean, and then got written up when the owner made a surprise visit. I didn't close, so it wasn't my job, and the owner said, "You work here. The store is dirty, so it is your job." I then had to go tell the owner that it was my fault, and he still responded. Regardless of what you did or didn't do, he came into a dirty store and did not clean it. That's not acceptable. I removed my rule change and just made it mandatory to clean before leaving. Story 9, no cell phones in high school, security. Collected them when you walked in, put them in Ziploc bags, and locked them up. They lost like 5 people's phones. Story 10, all printers were defaulted to print two-sided, and you were unable to disable that feature. The thought process being that this would 1. Reduce paper waste by literally cutting consumption in half. 2. Prevent people from printing out personal crap on work printers. This was decided by a committee of people, primarily from HR, who were tasked by the CEO to find ways to reduce costs and improve our corporate culture. To improve out culture, we basically decided that we'd be sus about work printers, and then we'd all sing together and have a Coke. What ended up happening instead was that corporate finance crap a brick, because you can't, or shouldn't, print financials double-sided, and the IRS doesn't take too kindly to getting filings delivered to them in that fashion. Reverse the policy? Nope. Just force areas to add blank pages into documents so that we trick the printers. HR then implemented their new Gestapo program where you were rewarded for turning in anyone who was doing personal business on work computers or on work printers. The problem was that a stunning amount of personal business was actually stuff like employee benefits stuff, filling out insurance forms, submitting flex pay receipts, scanning your transcripts for our tuition assistance program, etc. While the VP of HR decided to go full-on thunder and say that employee benefits stuff wasn't work-related and needed to be done at home on your personal PC, our freaking chief legal officer came down as our voice of moral reasoning to say that was bullcrap. And only then did some of the stupidity unfold. The printer thing was done officially once the CAO and CFO started getting double-sided financials. When they complained, their underlings gave them time studies to show the financial costs of having highly paid CPAs do crap like insert blank pages to trick printers instead of, doing accounting and stuff. Story 11. Had a fellow at my old place of work that was promoted to sales manager. Within a few days, he drafts up a document, which he tries to get all of us to sign, basically stating that we aren't working to our full potential and that to make profits soar, we would have to work even when we weren't working, aka taking calls from customers, no matter the day or time. This resulted in an almost immediate revolt, and about 10 plus people bypassing him directly and going right to the owner. He was demoted then, later fired within a week. Story 12. In college after my freshman year, they decided on a new rule set to enforce a meal plan because students just weren't signing up for them, and students were renting small houses nearby. Therefore, you're not allowed to move off campus unless your home is within 30 minutes of campus. You have to have a meal plan while living on campus. Our food was god-awful bad. I researched into why it was so bad, and it turns out it was by Sodexo. Half the time, all the food was so horrid that we couldn't stomach it, and the other half it was just bad but stomachable. Know what happened? Students had meal plans, but they didn't eat. They went out and bought their own groceries to bring them back to their rooms. School realized it was wasting tons of food because it was preparing it, and nobody was eating it. So it tried to shame the students by showing us how much was wasted every week. Some students decided to respond by putting a sign on the administration's door saying, "Food won't be wasted if you give us some actual damn food we can eat." Another big one was when they implemented the housing lottery for our campus. Originally, it was a first-come, first-served basis. Administration got pissed because people started camping out in front of the area the night before, so the ones who really wanted certain roommates could make sure they were there bright and early. So the random lottery system comes in and we were told we couldn't change a decision at all until a month after the next year started. Everyone just made swaps on their own and told the administration afterward. Administration got pissed and said they needed to move back to their original rooms, and most everyone said, "No. So if you need me, here I am at this location." I swapped with this person so me and my friends could room together like we wanted. I was gone by this one, but the school had a very rare type of semester schedule that made us stand apart from everyone else. We were a block schedule. A new president came in, and she decided that we needed to get off that and instead go to a weird hybrid system that just sounded more convoluted than going to a normal semester system. Turns out, the faculty and students hated that idea in ridiculous amounts, and it showed in a campus-wide vote on it where the results were published. New president decided to force it to change by saying that the faculty had influenced the student body, that it was inconvenient for them, and therefore the votes of almost everyone who didn't like it didn't count. A massive amount of professors retired at the end of that year in response. Edit. Just to also say this, believe it or not, I loved my time there. The professors and students were great. Just stupid admin decisions made some bad running experiences. It's also changed so much in the past 5 years that I can't even say if all these problems still exist now. I hope not. And since I've had so many questions, this was Tusculum College in Eastern Tennessee. I was there circa 2006 to 2009 before I transferred to a place that had a better degree for my major. Story 13. The deputy head of our school banned fidget spinners, and rightly so. In his defense, they were everywhere. On the final day of year 11, someone hacked his school intranet login and edited the bulletin, leaving a notice in his name, saying that fidget spinners were now not only unbanned but mandatory, and that aficionados could come to his office and learn tips and tricks from him. Story 14. Any software related to job, whether written inside or outside company time, belongs to the company, me. So if I write and release malware at home, it's the company's problem? The clause was immediately removed. Story 15. During our general meeting last week, the owner of the company went on a bit of a rant about negative reviews of management on a popular jobs website with a green logo. He demanded that we stop posting negative reviews immediately and shamed anyone in the room who had done so. As you can guess, people doubled down and posted their grievances on the same day as the meeting. Story 16. I was told this story when I was in the Army by a parachute rigger. The workday in the Army is 9 o'clock to 4:30. Riggers packing troop chutes had a daily quota of 35 chutes. Once they got good at it, these guys could be done by 2:30, which is a very nice workday indeed. Well, they got this new captain who decided that since these guys are getting 35 done by 2:30, then obviously making them work until 4:30 would increase output even more. So of course that unit's numbers went way down, and the 35 and you're done for the day was quickly reinstated. Story 17. Not me, but my friend's old place. My friend was one to show up a half hour early before work and was a commission-based salesman with salary, just like the other salesmen, who would always show up barely on time to hours late. Friday night comes along and management decides to hold a meeting to announce the new policy. If you're late, you go home for the day, and if you're late 3 days a month, you're fired. The weekend goes by and everyone is on time. During the week, a few people call out sick right as the store opens. The weekend is coming up and my buddy is scheduled for Saturday, but not Sunday or Monday. And he's going to Disneyland with his wife, who has Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. Friday night, he packs his wife's car. Saturday comes along and he's in the parking lot a half hour early. He pops in his favorite cassette, fires up a joint, and proceeds to hotbox his car. He walks in 5 minutes late, reeking of pot, looks at the clock, and then to his boss in front of the whole sales floor and loudly says, "Oops, I'm late, guess I need to go home," with a crap-eating grin on his face. The bosses started backpedaling the policy and started to tell him it wasn't for him and they'll let it slide. He loudly stated that it wouldn't be fair if they made an exception for him and that he would see them Tuesday. When he got back to work on Tuesday, the policy was gone. Same company years later hired some absolute genius of an accountant who sold the idea to management that employees were making more than management and that they should go from commission to salary. All the top salesmen jumped ship ASAP. The remaining bottom feeders got a raise compared to their normal salary and commission, and they didn't have to do crap all day to get it. Less than a year later, they shut their doors for the last time. Story 18. Lonedale R14 School in Lonenadel, Mo, late 80s, early 90s. Our fairly small rural school went from K-8, so we split lunchtimes in our gym/cafeteria. For some reason, our school actually invested in a noise control system because we could apparently be quite loud during lunch, and I guess the teachers got tired of trying to keep us kids quiet-ish and eat. This new piece of equipment was mounted high on the wall and looked exactly like a stoplight. When it was green, we were free to talk. If it became yellow, we were to be careful of how much noise we made. If it turned red, it would buzz loud, like when the game clock runs out at a basketball game. Installing this thing almost immediately had the opposite effect they desired. It became a game to us. We would only get quiet in order to make it go back to green. Then, as a large group, we would progressively get louder. We would stall it out at yellow before surging our collective voices to make it hit red and buzz, at which time we would all cheer, laugh, and get quiet again to reset it to green. Good times. Story 19. Programmer here. Management implemented an agile work tracking system that measured programmers by the amount of feature requests they completed. We quickly figured out how to game that system by breaking everything down into the maximum number of feature requests we could imagine. We'd make separate feature stories for make new button, make button blue, make button respond when clicked, make new page for the new report, run business logic to get results, display results in grid, set font for grid, make grid sortable, make back button, return to previous page. We became great at dividing a one-day task into 20 one-hour tasks. Management loved it. Our team looked 20 times as productive and became an example to show off our process as the best performing team, despite producing far less actual work and more useless form filling. Story 20. Stop giving kickback for walk-in sales. I work at a hotel, and the high management had the bright idea not to give us anything for charging walk-ins, late checkouts, early check-ins, and upgrades. So now we give them for free whenever we can. Story 21. Our process integrity. People decided every international order over 100,000 needed to be approved by a manager at the purchase requisition stage before the sales order could be processed. The problem? Purchase requisitions only generated after the sales order was completed. This meant it was impossible to complete any international order worth more than 100,000, and they launched this policy unannounced 2 days before Christmas. I ended up staying in the office until 9 at night, trying to get our data people to create a way for me to order 300K in parts from Sweden for the holidays. Story 22. A big shipping company I worked at for a couple months said we would be working 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. They didn't tell all the new employees, including myself, that holiday hours were going to be 7 a.m. to whenever the duck we feel like telling you to go home, around 10 to 11 p.m. Naturally, people would get in 5 to 7 hours of work and go on break, then just not come back. That led to we can no longer allow lunch breaks. Me and roughly 50-70 other workers quit on the spot. Story 23. When my school moved to a newly built site, they also tried to establish a new rule set for a new generation or something. The first one, because they loved their fancy new building so much, was that nobody was allowed to leave the building until the end of the school day, including breaks. The front door would literally be locked unless there was a fire alarm. Suffice to say, either nobody turned up or a lot of fire alarms were pulled before the rule was thrown away. There were also military-style uniform inspections at random throughout the day, and they looked to us, I was in 6th form, to set the example for the kids. However, they were so overzealous and dictatorial that it became comical, and we all very quickly stopped caring and told them to send us home or get lost and stop treating us like trash. There were more stupid rules like this, but our first group of 6th form ended up tearing them all down in a couple of months. Story 24. When I was in 8th grade, my school implemented a new iPad program. We were recognized as an Apple certified school or some bullcrap like that. The problem was that students were just using them to play games. Administration didn't have any way to crack down on it, and teachers had no clue how to implement it into the classroom. We constantly played 2048 in class, since it was impossible for them to block all the different iterations for it. And when they made it an instant demerit to be found playing it, even in lunch and homeroom, we just switched over to browser Tetris. It was so bad that one kid who sat right next to me didn't even try to focus on school. He would spend the entire period playing on his iPad, then constantly complain that he kept scoring 50s and 60s on his tests. Story 25. I tell this story a lot, mostly because it explains where my attitude comes from, my mother. At a small-town Kansas middle school, administrators had this system called the STEP program. Basically, students were to carry around this weekly report card where a school faculty member could write any of the students up for a multitude of things. If you called someone an insult, you got a step. If you were late to class, step. If you fell asleep during class, step. I was considered the teacher's favorite a lot of the time because I enjoyed school and learning, but my step sheet wasn't empty. No, my step sheet was mostly Paul Whoop forgot his pencil again, or Paul wrote in his novel during class time, etc. Very mundane things, and mostly just me being forgetful or just bored in class. So you get 2 free steps, basically nothing happens. However, when you get to step 3, you have to fill out this additional form that has a gold copy, pink copy, etc. They were really getting us Kansas middle schoolers ready for the corporate world. Anyway, the form is to explain in your words why you got all 3 steps. Then you're supposed to take it to one of your parents and have them sign. Unfortunately, my parents worked second shifts, and I was a latchkey kid, so I was in bed by the time my parents got home from work, and I'd forget to leave it out, or they wouldn't see it, or I'd forget the sign thing at home. Yes, lots of excuses, but crap happens, you know? If you forget the step 3 form, guess what? You get another step. Now you're at step 4, and step 4 means I am removed from class, taken to the front office, and I'm told to call my parents in front of a faculty member. This usually always happened in the afternoon by the time my parents are at work, and I'd always choose my mom because she was more capable of getting to the phone than my dad. So I'd call up my mom and tell her what happened. She'd then ask to speak to whomever was my guard that day. We joked that the faculty member that removed me from class took me to the office and monitored me during the call as my prison guard. And I'd hear her berate them for about 5 minutes about how she was busy, the entire program was stupid, and I was doing well in school, so none of the other crap mattered. This went on from grade 6th to 8th. Finally, my mother had enough. Apparently, her manager told her no more calls from my school or she was going to be written up. So she called the school principal and requested a meeting with him. She had me go with her because she wanted to know exactly why I was being written up. The principal claimed the program helps students learn responsibility and gets them ready for the real world. My mother explained she didn't carry around a sheet where all her write-ups are kept. She wasn't required to call her parents when she got in trouble, and the things I was being written up for are ridiculous. She then piled all pink copies of the Step 3 forms that I'd been given over the 3 years, and most had been forgetting a pencil. She understood it was up to her to provide pencils for me, and it was up to me to have necessary utensils for class. However, in the real world, she explained that she isn't required to bring a utensil to work because work provides those things. Then she looked at the principal and said, "Do you provide the coffee that you drink every morning? Do you bring notebooks you take notes in during meetings?" The principal looked so flustered and didn't have an answer. He did tell my mother that there wasn't anything he could do, as it was the school board that implemented the program. She nodded, told him thank you, and we walked out. I went back to class. Next school board meeting, my mother went to them and told them exactly what she told the principal. No one had a decent argument to give my mother in regards to how the STEP program was implemented. The board told her she'd need overwhelming parental support in order to remove the program. She nodded, told them thank you, and we walked out. My mother had a second job. She went to every PTA meeting. She called everyone in the phone book, went door to door, and she petitioned the parents about the program. For the most part, a good portion of people agreed with my mother, and they signed. Some other parents took initiative as well and began petitioning along with my mother until almost every household had been contacted in this small town. Next school board meeting, my mother provided copies of the petition to the board and demanded they remove the program. They did so. Edit: I told my mom that I posted the story here on Reddit about the STEP program and that everyone has been so kind, commenting on her badassery. She laughed and said, paraphrasing, "It was the stupidest damn policy and the teachers had favorites they never wrote up. They were singling you out because you were the kid and we were the outsiders in town. We moved there when I was 11 and I was tired of dealing with it. You were in so much trouble when you were one of the quietest kids with some of the best grades." Story 26. My middle school tried to prohibit students from bringing backpacks into class. You could bring a purse, bag, etc. However, just not a backpack. They wanted students to either stop by their locker before every class period, impossible without being late, or carry a large stack of heavy textbooks around all day. Due to the latter reason, the rule got canceled within a week. This was in 1998-99, so I'm not sure what they were trying to achieve with this rule. One job I had a nails should only be in neutral colors rule. Every rule was enforced rather strictly except for this one, because per the words of a manager, every woman would get written up. Story 27. At an industrial site I used to work for, they introduced an absolutely no overtime policy. The people that most commonly worked overtime were the maintenance guys. They had to cut out their preventative maintenance in order to make their hours while being available for all shifts. It took 3 months of daily breakdowns before they decided to try something else. Story 28. No N-words in the Huck Finn. Our high school teacher made us buy the censored version for his class, and numerous parents complained about the censorship as well as the added cost. Since our school library had sets of the original we could have read for free. Story 29. No one can clock in more than 5 minutes early. There's too much overtime. Well, this has resulted in the shift relief not getting onto the floor for 15 minutes, because before you have to be clocked in to do your daily safety meeting, which takes 15 minutes, which is causing the people who are waiting to go home to clock 15 minutes later, which renders the stop clocking in 15 minutes early thing a moot point. Story 30. Way back in the antediluvian days of the 20th century, I worked as a government inspector in one of the larger U.S. states. This was before the advent of government employee union. Each fiscal year, the personnel dept would come up with proposals for reimbursing employees for official travel, discuss it with an employee association, and send it to the state legislature for rubber stamping. One year, someone came up with the bright idea that travel reimbursement should cover more than overnight trips. Employees who were required to travel more than 25 miles from their headquarters should get a lunch allowance. My guess is that no one looked hard at the proposal, and those that did were thinking of staff who went to occasional meetings, not people who were on the road every day. Well, my agency had the state divided up into districts. Inspectors in the districts were on the road almost daily. In my case, it was a combination of overnight and day trips. It was pretty common to be more than 25 miles away from my office, and my colleagues and I discovered that it was easy to change pretty common to almost always. Multiply that by not only my own agency staff, but staff in every other agency that did field work. We cleaned up on the lunch allowances. The state budget for employee travel was completely blown before the year was half over, and as soon as legally possible, The rule was changed to cover only specific emergency conditions. Story 31. A nursing home in our area thought it would be a great idea to bring back the traditional white nursing caps. They made it mandatory for all female nurses to wear during their shifts or be written up, and eventually pointing yourself out. Male nurses were not included. About half of the staff quit within the first 2 weeks. Several started working at my facility. The others that stayed said that the residents and families of residents laughed and made fun of the nurses constantly. Pretty degrading and sexist comments. Basically, about 3 months after this all went down, someone from corporate came in and fired all the directors who implemented the uniform change, and everything went back to normal. Several nurses stayed with my company, but a few went back when the rules changed. Story 32. One of top managers for my work decided that everyone who's worked there for 7+ years had to do a special online training course that consisted of 2 400+ page volumes of leadership training, followed by a 20-25 question test for each volume. You were expected to complete this within 1 year of being automatically signed up for the course. Failure to pass the tests or to complete the course by the end of that year rendered you ineligible for promotions and almost guaranteed to be laid off within a year. So many people tried to take the guaranteed severance package option by not doing the course that they had to change the rule that you wouldn't get laid off or not promoted, but you still had to do the course. People still didn't do it. That guy finally left shortly after and a new guy replaced him and promptly chucked that course and the whole idea of it into the garbage. Story 33. As a part-time employee at Walmart, I was told that I'd need 3 weeks in advance to change anything about my schedule. I was going back to school for the summer pretty abruptly and told my managers that I'd need Tuesdays and Wednesdays removed from my schedule for the next 2 weeks, immediately, so that I could go to school. They told me no, so I went in the day before class and just quit. No 2-week notice from me. I was pretty clear that I was going to go to school regardless of whether they'd fix my schedule, and I wasn't about to get fired for not showing up for half of my shifts. Story 34. No swapping shifts without a shift swap form. Immediately backfired when the manager had a stack of shift swap forms every day to approve and update the digital roster. Story 35. It's in place this year, but I'm assuming it's going to backfire shortly. My high school banned backpacks and phones this year and took away advisory, which was pretty much a free period for clubs to meet. Thank God I graduated last year and don't have to deal with this bull crap, but I'm sure it's not going to go very well. Story 36. College removed chairs in cafeteria so people wouldn't hang around. Now people just don't eat at the cafeteria. It's a ghost hall, and most of the food is thrown away daily. Really sad. Story 37. In an attempt to make school more enjoyable, I guess, they put a jukebox in the cafeteria. This was in 2001, so there was a bunch of generic pop songs in it and like a handful of classic rock songs. My school was full of rednecks, and they wanted country music, so the only song that ever got played was That Smell by Skinnerd. For a week, everyone eating lunch got to hear that song like 5-7 times. I say a week because that was how long it took before some tweaker got fed up and cut the power cord. Story 38. As GM of a small business, I had an informal, just shoot me a text if you will be late or are sick and can't come in rule. That policy backfired when one employee texted me of days in a row, being late. They lived closer to the office than I did, and I only had a 7-minute commute. They got all pissy when I finally wrote them up for being late, claiming, I thought we just had to send you a text. So the rule went to, just call me if you're sick and not able to come in. That worked okay until this past week. First, one employee called in 3 days in a row, intentionally calling before the office opened, knowing that I and my location manager wouldn't be there. He got rid of his cell phone about a month ago and claimed to not have a landline. He would call from an unknown caller ID, so we couldn't even call him back. Second, I had a very early morning flight on Saturday, and all my staff knew I would be out of town and when. I land after 3 hours to find my phone had been blowing up. One employee decided to wait until he knew I was on the flight to text me that he would not be coming in. That left me trying to arrange employees at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning without access to my computer or scheduling Excel stuff in a city 1,500 kilometers away. Now the rule is, if you are sick, you need to call and speak directly with either the GM or a location manager. Texting and voicemail are no longer accepted. Lessons learned. Vague rules will be exploited by employees. It's a cruel fact of life, and better to be thought a dictator for a day than as a chump for months. Story 39. Delivery driver. Here, manager was tired of the higher-ups caring about our delivery times, how long it takes to leave and get back to the store. She implemented a 22-min delivery time rule. If your average went over for 3 consecutive days, it was a write-up or termination. Okay. Tell me how we're supposed to go to the far end of our delivery range. 10 minutes one way on a good day, but 15-20 on heavy traffic times. Duck us for getting stuck behind trains. There are a lot of train tracks around town, and you can get stuck for 10 plus minutes. There's also a ton of variables. Bad weather, bad traffic, customer has to count out and pay you in quarters. Customer doesn't have cash, so you have to call the store to run a card. One regular customer is a prison, so sometimes we can wait for 20 min just for them to walk across the grounds to meet with us. Some days we are ducking slammed and don't have enough drivers. Most of us try our hardest, but 22 min or less for our faraway deliveries, especially if it's a double plus, is extreme. Most places have 30 minutes or less for their delivery times, which makes sense. Didn't last long, but we still have a computer to dictate how long things will take. No variables are accounted for. Now we just fudge the numbers by manipulating dispatch. Extra info. We cover 2 towns, so it's a pretty large area. Recently, one of our competitors shrank their delivery range, so it has increased our business. Story 40. So the high school I used to go to wasn't really a typical high school. It was pretty small, and almost all the students were problematic. Basically, it was a school you were sent to if you couldn't function on other schools. Other schools couldn't be ducked and to deal with your crap. This resulted in a pretty alternative atmosphere. Since most students there were pieces of crap, a lot of misbehavior was usually expected. I recall small ground fireworks being set off in the main hall, crap being thrown from higher floors or just out the window, etc. Usually these actions wouldn't get major repercussions. Often no teachers actually saw who did it, so whoever did got away with it. As long as nobody snitched, you could get away with a lot in that school. Then, at some point, a certain group of people came to realize that when the fire alarm is pressed, the entire school needs to be evacuated. All students and teachers need to drop what they're doing and get out of the school and wait for instructions outside. This was obviously hilarious to this group of kids, so they would press the ducking thing all the time. There was a period in which the fire alarm would go off at least once every day. It almost became a regular thing. Nobody was ever surprised anymore when it did. Everyone knew who the kids that were doing it were too. But since nobody ever saw one of them do it, they all got away with it. The school staff decided then that it was getting annoying to have to take everyone outside every day, even though there never was actually a fire. So they changed the rules so that when the alarm goes off, everyone has to stay in their class and wait for a teacher to come by with instructions. This usually just meant that the alarm would go off. Everyone would wait a minute, the alarm would be turned off, and a teacher went by all the classes to let everyone know there was no fire and to stay inside. The point of this was to take the fun out of constantly raising a false fire alarm, and it worked. This crafty group of craphead kids no longer enjoyed pressing the stupid alarm every day if it no longer meant wasting everyone's time. So they ducking lit a toilet stall on fire. It was the wildest crap. We were just sitting in class when the alarm went off again. We all just assumed it was another hoax and calmly waited for it to stop, which it didn't. Then, a panicking teacher burst in and told us all to get out because there was a fire. There was smoke all through the hall with the toilet in it. A fire truck showed up. It was a huge mess. Everyone got to go home though, so that was neat. Also, not one kid ever got in any kind of trouble throughout the whole thing. Story 41. Someone sprayed a swear word on the door. So the director thought it would be a good idea that if no one stood up and paid for the damage, couldn't be just wiped off, I heard. And because of ducking course, no one took responsibility. They claimed that just everyone could pay 1 or 2 euros. That way, the school could pay the repairs and still have money left to repair any damage that would occur later. Some idiot or genius sprayed, "Don't you have insurance?" on a few more doors that were next to the original door. I assume they just used the money we paid to repair it, but they didn't mention that. Week again, story 42. Pizza place I worked at in high school implemented a zero-tolerance policy on employees taking home any food home that wasn't paid for at non-employee prices. Any screw-ups or unpicked up orders? Trash. The local homeless population started flocking to the store and calling in bogus orders because they knew there would be free pizza in the dumpster every night. Story 43. Worked in an office with strict 8:30, 5 office hours. As time went by, people would come in later, say 8:45, but might stay till 6 or even later. One day, one of the directors got pissed off because someone he wanted to talk to wasn't there at 8:40 and sent a nasty email demanding that everyone stop showing up late, saying we all had a bad work ethic, etc. From then on, everyone was in at dead on 8:30, and of course left at 5 on the dot. Story 44. I'm an electrician in NYC. A few months ago, I was doing a job at the Google building in Manhattan. They were building out a few floors to put in new offices and workspaces. The general contractor was kind of an hole, mainly because they implemented safety measures that were over the top or unnecessary for the work environment. Remember, we're working inside a fully operational building with light materials, no real heights to deal with, or other hazards you'd expect on a full-scale construction site. One of their brilliant rules that they implemented was that there were to be no more music playing. So no radios, Bluetooth speakers, or even just playing music from the speaker on your phone. The reasoning behind this was that it was considered excessive noise, and nobody would be able to hear you if you were talking to them for any reason. So what did everyone do? We just started wearing earbuds, headphones instead. Technically, it was allowed since it wasn't creating a noise hazard, but now nobody could talk to anyone or hear anyone speak because their ears were so plugged up with whatever music or podcasts we were listening to. If anything, the earbuds were a bigger safety hazard compared to if they just let us keep the radios, but politely asked us to keep the volume a little lower. Story 45. Company overcomplicated attendance policy that turned into a mixture of confusion and malicious compliance. I worked at a place that went from zero attendance policy to an absurdly overcomplicated point system. You got 3 minutes of leeway before you were late. Anything over 7 minutes late got you a point, and any 3 occurrences of tardiness between 3-7 minutes during a rolling 7-day period got you a point. Over 30 minutes late got you like 3 points or something. Points remained on a rolling year, but 6 months of perfect attendance would clear all points. It was some absurd number like 22 points until termination, though I think you got written up at like 15 or something. Employees did not have access to see their points. At the same time, they implemented some weird rule about PTO, where we could take PTO in lieu of points, but the lowest increment we could take was 2 hours. This caused so much duckery that it's almost impossible to detail, but some of the more obvious ones were exactly what happened. Many people were now late far more than ever, and as long as they kept it under 3 minutes or stayed on top of their 3 7-minute rolling periods, never had to worry about points. Way more people were overly concerned with earning points that a ton of managers' directors' time started being taken up by their employees as having meetings with them to discuss the points they may or may not have. Especially hilarious because these people were typically the ones who were never late. Again, because of the fear of any points, tons of people started taking that 2-hour PTO loophole. We got 15 days of vacation, 3 sick days, and 2 personal days for our total PTO. That's 160 hours. You could come in 2 hours late once a week and still have a few days to take off. What made this go really crazy was during the winter. Any day where there was snow, there'd be a mass panic of late call-ins of people using that 2-hour PTO. Instead of having people who might have been 15 minutes late and earned a point, or 35 minutes late and earned 3 points, everyone would take 2 hours of PTO anytime it snowed. We were a centralized financial aid call center for a school with campuses throughout the country. About 40 reps covered about 2,000 phone calls a day, 80% plus of which were directed to us by the local campus admissions offices. Actual students sitting in these offices with their admissions advisors, waiting for a FA rep to pick up the phone. It was always hilarious to come in after the slightest amount of snow to 70 plus calls on hold, with longest hold time approaching an hour. Story 46. When I was in school, I was part of a board game club that just wasn't very good. We never won a competition, and it led to a lot of negative vibes among the students. Anyway, they just decided to ban board games in general. Anyone got caught playing would be put into detention. A few weeks go by, and I'm asked to go to the storeroom, and guess what I found? A stash of all the old board games. Story 47. My high school had a thing called advisory period at the beginning of every school day. It was supposed to act as a homeroom type thing where you were assigned to any teacher in the school in a class of mixed grades so that we'd socialize/help one another, I guess, and have a teacher you could always go to for support. Some of my friends had cool teachers and they did some fun things or just watched videos, but 90% of the time we just sat in silence for 20 minutes every morning. It was mandatory and you could not skip it without getting into trouble. I could have extra time in the morning and get to my first class for 9:10, but instead, I had to be there for 8:35, asleep at my desk doing nothing. I'm fully convinced advisory did nothing but grow resentment and encourage procrastination. You actually weren't technically allowed to finish homework in advisory but I always did and would intentionally put off homework to the morning before class. Also, my advisory was with a resource teacher and they always move around. So for 4 years of high school, I had 3 different homeroom teachers. On a positive note, however, I did get really close to my last one during grades 11 to 12, who was understanding of my mental health challenges. I still visit her, thanks Mrs. Campbell. Story 48. Oh, in school back in the day, we participated in a diversity-driven activity carried out in the form of the Wall of Tolerance, or something along those lines. Basically, we had to write down stereotypes and put them up so we could tear them down. It ended up, I'm just glad we didn't end up on local news. Story 49. Boss insists that lunchtime is from 12:30 p.m., no exception. Lunch is not paid time. The second day, he comes in hot to trot with something for me to do between 12 and 12:30 and needs it done right away. I look over at my clock, which says 12:09 or whatever, and say, "You said yesterday that lunch is from 12 to 12:30. No exceptions," and went back to my sandwich. If I don't get paid from 12 to 12:30, there's no way in hell I'm working for free. Story 50. To combat students from repping gang colors at my high school senior year, the principal banned the color red. Not blue, and just red, because I guess the high school was in a Norteno area. The news covered it, and it was repealed within a month or two into the school years, because it was just such a stupid rule, banned red as in even if your shoelaces were red, or if you were just wearing red earring. That petty. For those outside Kie, Norteno was red gang colors, Crips, blue colors. There are more, but those are two big ones in Northern California. Story 51. My high school had a policy against colors that could be gang-related. This was either strictly enforced or ignored dependent on the assistant principal at the time. Normally, it isn't an issue when it comes to it, because the administration has a good idea of who is likely to be involved in gangs and whatnot. However, this one day, a kid got put into school suspension because he wore a black shirt with a red rose on it. This kid was the furthest thing from a gang member in our school, and everyone knew it, but the admins didn't care. As a result, the actual gang members, gang affiliates, decided to protest by wearing their colors in the following days. We didn't even think twice about it. People from rival gangs ignored each other for the sake of a bigger cause. This soon got about 80+ kids either being put in school suspension, off-school suspension, or just the kids walking off campus. The administration had a big assembly the following week about the dangers of gang culture. Literally, no one cared. The entire school was that upset about the incident and how the administration firmly believed this innocent kid was somehow a hardcore gangbanger. Story 52. For some reason, my department started a rule having to keep phones in their cars or locker. Eventually, the supervisor said, "Duck it," because no other department was told this. Story 53. Went to a low-income school where extremely few ducks were given about piercings, hair color, etc. New principal arrived from a higher income school and suddenly started enforcing the dress code. Attendance rate starts dropping. Wonder which looks worse on a principal's record. Shout out to the teachers who continued giving no ducks despite admin orders. At least some folks had their priorities in order. Story 54. Rule at my workplace is that if you were late, you had to bring donuts for everyone. People quickly figured out that the cost of being 4 hours late was to bring donuts. As a result, if you were running late, you just had a slow, easy morning and stop by to pick up donuts on your way in. Our boss, who had put the rule into place, thought it was funny and just let it continue. He was an easygoing guy and really good at motivating people. Letting them get away with this sort of thing that meant they stayed late or showed up after hours for emergencies. Story 55. I work at a very relaxed company, and our New York office, the main office, has a rule where you can start drinking out of the alcohol fridge at 5 p.m. est, because the workday is usually done or at least slowed down by then, and people like to have a drink before leaving, especially considering almost no one drives to work due to the office being located in Times Square. Well, we have an office in New Orleans now, the one I work at, and the rule is the same thing. You can start drinking at 5 p.m., which is 4 p.m. for us. People start drinking at 4 before the workday is even done. I guess it's not terrible because most people just sip on wine or crack open one beer and don't really get drunk or too tipsy to work. Still pretty funny how the rule works, though. Story 56. My high school tried to ban use of phones and iPods between classes. So essentially, we had to put our stuff away at the beginning of school and never touch it until the lunch hour, and then away again until school let out. I got stopped once for having my headphones on while walking from my first hour class to the next. I took them off, walked about 5 steps, and put them back on, just like everyone else. Story 57. This was a weird, fun one. My 6th grade teacher had a rule that if you said the words "shut up," you had to spend your recess writing "shut up" on a piece of paper 100 times and turn it in before lunch. I think he thought it'd just be an easy deterrent, and after the first couple students slipped up and had to do it, it'd prevent any others from doing it. He was a genuinely nice teacher too. Instead, it turned into a game between everyone in the class to try to get others to say it. We were basically super troopers ahead of our time. Story 58. I went to a private Christian high school in Florida that received a huge donation purely for the use of substances testing students. Everyone was tested at the beginning of the year, and then people were selected randomly. They targeted the known partiers every few months or so to keep costs down. They tried to tell us that using their new hair tests, that they could see if we had been drinking regularly, but a quick Google search showed they could only see alcohol use from a few days before the test, as opposed to the 3-month time frame of substances. Also, the tests couldn't pick up on hallucinogen use. Instead of smoking and chilling out, most juniors and seniors were dropping substances on the weekend. One of my friends was found in the middle of a major street tripping his balls off while cars swerved around him. The administration is still testing students 6 years later, and it's pushed the kids on the fringe to try crazier and crazier substances. It's a policy that is putting the lives of curious 16 and 17-year-olds at risk. But the school continues to stand by the policy. Story 59. My company installing GPS in our trucks. The company gets paid by the job, and we are hourly. Before the GPS, we could bang out 7 or 8 jobs, billing them for an hour, and we'd be off the road by 2. With the GPS, we have to be on the road or on site for 8 hours every day. So now instead of busting ass to be home early, we do 3 or 4 jobs to stretch the time. Way less work gets done, but we get paid the same. Story 60. I work in the motor trade, and it's always the rules about car keys that backfire. Carrying around bunches of keys is a part of nearly everyone's job. Left to nature and the waxing and the waning of the moon, car keys will always go missing, but they always magically come back. It's when you interfere with the natural cycle that they get proper ducking lost. In my first job, the manager would raise ungodly hell about missing keys and rain down an ungodly torrent of abuse on whatever poor soul misplaced them or accidentally left them in their jacket pocket going home. The net result was that if after a frantic search by the whole garage yielded nothing, a review of the CCTV yielded nothing, whatever poor soul who forgot to hang the keys back up would just toss the keys into a ditch rather than face the crap storm. Another place I worked in had a no keys in your pockets rule to stop people going home with them accidentally. What happened then was that if you had a bunch of keys, you needed to put them down somewhere if you were doing paperwork or moving a car around the lot. So keys were left in random other cars or in random offices where you had no hope of finding them. I've risen to the point where I make the rules now. I never make a fuss if a key goes missing. The amount of drama a manager causes about a missing key is inversely proportional to the amount of time it takes for a key to magically reappear on the keyboard. Also, keys always in pockets. This way, if somebody misplaces a key, it's in their pocket and they'll realize as soon as they go home and change out of their work clothes. This means we don't need to open every ducking car on the lot to check for keys that have been left on a passenger seat or fallen on the floor. Story 61. I'm old enough that we had the substances are bad, don't do substances, as told by the very serious principal, thundering down like some evangelical preacher, pissing off cops by being so ridiculous as to pull out their "to addict," because no substances means no substances. And if I don't see it, it isn't happening, now is it? There was a coffee shop that had opened up about a half block from school in less than 2 weeks. The guys who were dealing basically had their own booth, and there was basically a line of students getting coffee for all 3 lunch periods. It was ridiculously blatant, and the local police slow-walked the owners through the process. But ultimately, if the guys were low-key enough about it, basically they allowed it to occur because one of the kids dealing was the mayor's son or nephew or something. The state has a whole array of things they could have done, but practically the cops were looking the other way as diligently as they could, and the guys in the coffee shop may have well put a neon sign in the front of the window flashing, "Substances inquire within." The ladies running the coffee shop were motivated because they were selling more coffee and cookies than they knew how to keep up with. Story 62. At a restaurant I used to work in, they stopped giving the cooks free meals. We used to only take cheap stuff, things we kept on hand for kids' meals and things like that, so as not to drive up food cost. Once the no more free meals rule was implemented, we started stealing lobster and steaks. We got pretty brazen about it too. Since the entire kitchen was doing it, they couldn't possibly fire all of us. We were having full-on cookouts at someone's house, almost once a week, completely stocked with stolen food. We all figured that if we were going to get fired over a free meal, they very much said we would get fired if we were caught taking anything home without paying for it. It might as well be for foie gras and lobster instead of frozen chicken fingers and Easy Mac. Story 63. That one place I was working, they came up with the rule, no group talking. So every time we have a project, we need to talk to each other about. We yell at each other from across the room. Every time there was more than 2 people talking, the other people would yell, no group talking. Story 64. The day camp I worked at tried to respond to one parent's crazy request by saying male counselors weren't allowed to escort children to the bathroom. They even said if it was a male child who had to go, it had to be a female to escort them. They abandoned that rule a few hours after implementing it. Story 65. Had a professor in a college say, if overall class attendance went down below 50%, we would have a final. Otherwise, we had below 50% attendance a week in, and once he declared we were going to have a final, only 10 to 15 PPL started showing up after that point. This was a 300 personal lecture hall class. LMAO Story 66. In the UK in the 1970s, a chap called Joey Deacon wrote a book about growing up with cerebral palsy. and it was picked up by the main kids' TV program on the BBC called Blue Peter. Deacon and Blue Peter were part of a national campaign to treat people with CP with more respect, and specifically to stop using words like spaz and retard in the playground. Within months, the use of these words had died down a little, but now kids started substituting them for Joey, usually done while mimicking his speech. Teachers were not impressed, but you call a British adult in their 40s or 50s a Joey, they'll know what you mean. Story 67. There was that school in the UK, I think, that refused to change their uniform rules to allow the boys to wear shorts when it's hot out. So a bunch of the boys showed up one day wearing the skirts from the girls' uniform. They are now allowed to wear shorts. Story 68. This might not sound like a big deal, but a couple of catty middle-aged white women ran our gym and decided they wanted to force all members to wear badges to prove they paid to get in, despite a physical gate preventing them at the entrance unless a card was scanned. I said no. I said it was a dumb idea. I got fired. They implemented it for a week. Maybe. Clients, staff, and members complained. Neither of those women worked there anymore either. One decision equals scorched earth. Story 69. Used to work in an inpatient treatment facility. One of the perks was that meals were provided to staff members. The new CEO decided that it was far too expensive to feed clients and staff and put the kibosh to it in an effort to trim the food budget. The food at this place used to be decent, with a competent cook who knew how to use fresh ingredients. Now the food provided is processed and gross. Last I heard, the cook quit and they have the handyman preparing meals. The kicker? The food budget has gone up because now the food is all pre-made frozen. The clients hate it, and most of it goes in the trash. Story 70. My old company had a nice overtime policy for engineers called into work. When you stepped on the floor, you got an automatic 4 hours overtime. Well, they wanted to get rid of overtime pay but still give this. They had the bright idea to say if you worked your 40 hours before the end of the week, don't come in. This is a factory working almost 24/7. Most of the engineers didn't come in on Friday. Next week, a mass email went out saying you could get overtime to keep people working on Fridays, story 71. The North Carolina legislature enacted a rule establishing maximum class sizes for elementary grades K-3. They recently attempted to reduce the maximum class size. This allows legislators to claim to be pro-education, as they're working to reduce class sizes. However, they did not give schools any money to hire new teachers, and public schools can't turn away students for obvious reasons. So in order to comply with the law, schools would have to fire specials teachers, music, art, PE, home health, etc., and eliminate planning periods for teachers in order to hire the extra teachers necessary to reduce the class size. Most teachers and admin staff are of the opinion that these pro-education measures will actively make the quality of the education much worse. Thankfully, there were enough complaints that the rule was given a temporary reprieve. It will come up again for discussion this school year, though, so it's not quite dead yet. Here's hoping saner heads will prevail, and this year it will be put in the ground for good. Story 72. I worked the closing shift at a gas station in my college years. At the end of the day, we would have to take food set to expire out of the shelves and coolers, write it off, and dispose of it. This worked for 30 to 40 years. The owner of the company got too old, so he decided to sell. So, new owners, new rules. In their eyes, we were all just low-life temps who are definitely criminals. We were no longer allowed to write off the foods and dispose it ourselves because we would just hide stuff until it expires and then take it home. Their words, not mine. So instead, we were supposed to just put it in the office and wait for the general manager to come take care of it. The general manager that came by once a week. Remember, we were talking about fresh foods such as meat sandwiches, egg sandwiches, milk, fruits, etc. The office had a fire door, one that prevents smoke and such to permeate should a fire occur, which luckily also prevented much of the smell from entering the rest of the building. Basically, imagine a rancid open-air trash can, or rather, the manager's desk, filled with meats, dairy products, fruits, etc. For some strange reason, we were allowed to dispose of foods again, not long after, story 73. I'm transportation in the Air Force. Typically every year towards the end of the fiscal year, fuels will shut down specific pumps for some budgetary reason or something. So our boss made a rule leading up to the date that the shutoff would happen to fuel a vehicle every time it's used. Well, one day, the main base diesel pump gets shut off with only the pump that was around 5 to 6 miles away working. We had a job that day that needed 4 or 5 forklifts. When asked, our boss told us we still needing to fuel them when done. Now, these are warehouse forklifts that top out at maybe 8 mph going downhill. It was all flat. We all get done and are told to go fill them up. To get to the pump, you had to drive through base, the main area of base, on a road that led to one of the main gates. Oh yeah, and it was around lunchtime for most people. So there's this convoy of forklifts averaging about 5 mph holding up traffic in order to get fuel. There was a 3-mile-long row of cars just trying to get off base, stuck behind us. I could only laugh at the ridiculousness of the situation. The real kicker, though, we probably used more fuel driving out to those pumps than if we just left it go that one time. Story 74. We had this rule in high school some 10 years ago that after the bell for the lesson, the main door to the school were closed for 5 minutes. This was to catch all the smokers and get them into trouble. This was also against the law, as you can't close the school with students in the building due to the safety issues. Some guy knew a reporter from the local paper, and we organized a boycott. About 500 students stood in front of the building waiting for the bell to ring, and when the janitor closed the building, the reporter recorded that we couldn't get through the door. That was sick. We were all over the news and stuff, and they stopped closing that bloody door. Story 75. When I was in my junior year of high school, some former alumni donated close to $1 million for the explicit purpose of building a student center in the school. My school built that center and made it look really nice. But we weren't permitted to use laptops or phones while in the center, and volume had to be kept to a minimum. It laid totally vacant for my entire senior year. Why go to the student center where you can't study, play on your phone, or talk with your friends, when you can do all there either outside or in the mess hall? The rule was changed in my first year of college. You still can't have your phone or computer, but the volume restriction was removed.